Meet literary icons only on the program Book2ART, Delta Television Asaba, 10 a.m. every Wednesday. Do the art, stay smart.
Alright, welcome to the program Book2ART on Delta Television, the People's Pride. It's a delight to be here. I'm actually very excited because this is more like a union. 9 years away to this moment, I'm seeing my friend, and not just is a publisher, is an author. So I haven't seen him in 9 years, and now this is like a reunion, and it makes this moment very special. Now the program Book2ART is just for you, for those that are upcoming and for the veteran writers, and it's also to bring you up to speed on their literary works and, you know, reminder of the lessons therein. Not to talk too much, we will delve into our moment, and our very first take, as always, is the profile. We get to profile our guest so that you get to know who our guest is on the program before we meet him and do a bit on literary works. So feel this was for. He's no other than Chuma Nwokolo. He's a lawyer, he's a publisher, he's a writer. There's so many sides to him, and he has so many books to his name. Well, he's also behind the barcode. I'd want to find out what that is all about though. But in a moment, let's hit as you get to meet our guest on the profile.
Chuma Nwokolo was called to the bar in 1984 and appointed a notary public in 1995. He is the convener of the Good Governance Bribe Code projects. He co-founded African Writing Magazine. He was writer and resident at the Ashmolean Museum. He leads literary workshops around the world. His short stories and essays have been published by magazines such as London Review of Books, Agni, and the Massachusetts Review. His work has been translated into Italian, Sloven, Arabic, Yoruba, and Slovak. His first novel was published in 1983. His latest, The Extinction of Menhir, which centers issues of language and cultural extinction, was rated one of 2018's best 25 works of fiction by Publishers Weekly. Chuma Nwokolo has published other novels: Dangerous Inheritance, 1988, Diaries of a Dead African, 2003, Novels and Stories, African Tales at Jail Point, 1999, and One More Tale for the Road, 2003. Poetry collections, Memories of Stone, 2006, and The Final Statement of a Minor God, 2014. Short story collections, The Ghost of Sani Abacha, 2012, How to Spell Nanja in 100 Short Stories, Volume 1, 2013, and Volume 2, 2016, as well as essays, Law and Justice. Now let's fill a pause on the book Diaries of a Dead African. His voice certainly will amaze you.
When I woke this morning, I was sweating like a slave on the farm. Yet it wasn't the sweat of hard work that wet my bedsheet so. It was a sweat of fear. I was feeling as if a witch had poured fear inside me, the way my Abel used to pump our sleeping sons with pap more than 20 years ago. If you see how my chest was doing, that my heart did not cut was a miracle. As I pushed my door open into the compound and hung my bedsheet where it became my curtain, I tried to remember the exact and particular reason why I was so afraid. I couldn't. And I'm not surprised. The problems of my life are not the sort that one narrates to a native doctor and he laughs before he starts his treatment. My problems are the sort that the boldest witch doctor will hear halfway and flee. Is that not how I went to meet Catskis just before Easter? and he said he wouldn't waste his time and mind by praying, that my problems had surpassed the kind that prayer and fasting solve. It's just that adversity isn't something people boast about. Why in this Ikiroti, no one can stand beside me. It wasn't quite dawn, but as Ikiri people say, only a never-doer needs sunlight to gather his farm gear. I got dressed. No one can call my house a mud hut anymore, ever since I plastered it all over with cement. Except those people who have jealousy and witchcraft running in their veins and they think it is blood. That type of people can never forget what is under the plaster. On the harvest poles stick to the wall opposite my clay bed are the remnants of a 1999 harvest. Only 3 yam tubers. As soon as those 3 tubers filled my eyes, the silence also filled my ears. Maiva was not cursing her stubborn stove from the kitchen outside. Ibel and Kalamatus were not quarreling over who forgot to tether the goat the night before. I was alone in my compound with only 3 tubers of yam. That was when I remembered the exact and particular reason why I was so afraid. And my chest kept quiet. Because Ikiri people also say that the day a man recognizes the disease that will kill him is the day doctors stop eating his money. I remember the name of the fear that filled me like the urine of a witch. And when a disease has a name, at least it has a salutation. His name was starvation. It was 2 weeks until harvest, and tradition decrees that not a root may be disturbed in the fields before the day of the New Yam Festival. The situation was serious.
Our guest on the program today is Chuma Nwokolo, a barrister at law.
All right, there, great profile there. Now, you won't believe it. My guest on the program today is someone very unique, and he has been in the business of writing and publishing for a very long time. So if one should have a kid, I'd say that you'd have a kid of about 20 years. He's been in the business. But we'll fill his pause. He joins us in a moment. Let's make welcome Chuma Nwokolo. Hello. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much. Very much enjoy being here.
No, it's been a while, like 12 years, no, 9 years, 10 years.
Absolutely.
So 9, 10 years, what's been happening?
We've been writing, and that's what the business is all about.
To write,
recording what's happening in the country, and it's an interesting country right now, as you know.
Yeah, very interesting, and you know, the world is all about the new normal. You know, the COVID-19 pandemic and doing things differently. So people try as much as possible to get very, to use their phone all the time. They try to get people using their phone, and they're doing a lot of reading using the phone. So the internet is actually a gag with everyone driving into the process.
Absolutely. Right now, actually, the challenge is to read as little as possible so you don't overload your head with too much information. And to step back from the crisis and, you know, have a long-term perspective on it.
I can imagine.
So most of the time you have to ask yourself, what's going to be important in 10 years? What's going to be important in 100 years? That way you're able to negotiate all the crises that seems to come at you all the time.
So how are you actually keeping the faith, you know, writing amidst, you know, the new normal?
Well, you see, the thing about writing is that a good writer is actually a good thinker.
Okay.
So it's not just about writing all the time, it's about thinking about the things that are happening to you and things that are happening around you. Okay. So you are not writing when your house is on fire. You are putting out the flames. So there's a time to live, and then there's a time to write. Okay. So a good writer has to be engaged with his community, and then in retirement, when you now retire from the active hustle, you can now put down your thoughts on the paper.
I can imagine. And you are the convener of the Good Governance Bribe Code. Yeah.
Yes.
What is that all about?
The bribe code is an interesting concept. You see, I think the problem, our main problem in Nigeria with leadership is that of impunity, which means that once you have power, you can do absolutely anything you want, and there is no consequence, or at least very little consequence. So we can transform our leadership if we can bring consequence into bad behavior in leadership. That's what bribe code is all about. So what the bribe code does is three main things. First, it changes the punishment for serious corruption, and which means that instead of a normal slap on the hand, you steal $1 billion naira, you get maybe 6 months in jail or suspended sentence.
Okay, that's more like it.
You get total asset forfeiture, which means if you do that major deal, you are liable to lose everything you have. So once we change that change the punishment for serious corruption, the next thing we do is to also make it possible for anybody to report and be rewarded for information that leads to a conviction. And that is where the whistleblowers concept comes in.
So a lot of people actually supporting, the Good Governance Bribe Code online. You have great supporters.
Yes, there are supporters online. It's at www.bribecode.org. So I encourage people to go there to sign up, because every time you sign a petition, it's sent to the National Assembly. And they recognize that there is some interest in it.
Yeah, a great humanitarian beat there, and I salute you. I salute your courage. Actually, it takes one who has it, here, who's brave to actually do anything like that in our country and Nigeria. You spell it out, you just say it just the way it is. Now, let's get into your work. Literary works, you have so many to your name. First, I was actually amazed. I thought maybe it was just, the Diaries of a Dead African, because I've had that like 9 years.
Yeah.
And I thought it was just the ghost of Sani Abacha. I've had this for 9 years as well. And Memories of a Stone. But I never knew you had so many books to your name. You've written so many. And I said to myself, wow, this, I thought maybe I was actually, going to do just this. But you just said to me, you have another one, which is How to Spell Niger in 100 Short Stories. This is the volume 2 of it. And you have the first volume, How to Spell Niger in 100 Short Stories. You tell me more about this book. It's interesting. Anyways, so many books you've written. I have a few here. We have The Dangerous Inheritance. That's you also. That was 1988.
Yeah, that's a pacesetter. In the 80s, I think the first book I wrote was actually a pacesetter novel.
Okay.
Which was published in 1983.
Okay.
So it's coming up to the 40th anniversary of that book now. But I was in university studying law at the time when I wrote that book. So Dangerous Inheritance was the second pacesetter novel. Okay. And of course the pacesetter novels are no longer published, but people who read them still remember that.
I love pacesetters. If you ask me, I love pacesetters. You just read and you put yourself in the mood, and it's really nice. You don't want to do anything at all because of the way it is. Now, then in school we go, pacesetter. What are you doing? I'm doing pacesetter, even if they don't even know it. Okay, I think I really want that to come again. I really want that bit of writing style. Now, let's also talk about Diaries of a Dead African. We'll zero in on that, right here. But, that was also published 2003. Now, what was your mindset, writing Diaries of the Dead African? Now, what's the mindset of you putting this together? I know that this book is actually, the book is a 193-page book, as it were. And it has 3 heavy chapters. 3 chapters, and what we think is just maybe you flip through like 2 pages, 3 pages. No, it's heavy. Chapter 1 is heavy, chapter 2 is heavy, and chapter 3 is heavy. Now, what were you thinking about when you decided on Diaries of? You can actually fill that for me. Diaries of a Dead African. What were you thinking about?
Yeah, well, Diaries of a Dead African, I wrote it in 2001. It was first published as Diary of a Dead African. And that was by London Review of Books. And when it was published, it was just a diary of Jemima, a farmer who had lost his wife to a vulcanizer. He wouldn't have minded if he lost his wife to a trader or a farm or a banker, but he lost him to a vulcanizer, and that really upset him. Okay. So that was the story of Meme Jumai, the first diary. Now the second diary was by his son, Kalamatus. Now Kalamatus is a young man who went into the 419 business because he couldn't cope with the poverty in his house. And this was written way back in 2001, mark you. So it's like what is happening now kind of mirrors what, what's in the book. Okay. And so he himself, he has his major problem, of course, was that when he was 7 days old, the midwife who was circumcising him sneezed at the wrong moment and castrated him. So his diary is about his life after castration. Okay. And of course, you have the third diary by Abel Jumai, who is the second brother of the family. So that's basically the structure of a novel. It's a series of 3 novels in one, or 3 diaries, if you like.
Okay, in one. Okay. Yeah. Now let's look at the character. I know you touched a bit on it, Meme Jumai, and there's also Kalamatus Jumai and Abel Meme Jumai. Now these are strong characters, for you to put 3 bits together, I can imagine what you were actually thinking about for you to think about Meme Jumai. So what do you have to say about Kalamatus Jumai character?
Well, Kalamatus, he is an accident. Like I told you what happened in his blood. Even at the point he was being named, his father, like most Nigerians, sent word to his own father, that's the child's grandfather, give me a name to name my son. And then the letter writer wrote the name and sent in a letter to a taxi driver. Okay. And he asked him, when he opened the letter, he asked him why this name Kalamatus. Is there anybody called Kalamatus and where my father is staying now? He said, no, that's what my business is, to deliver the letter, not to interpret it. Okay. So that Christmas, when his father finally arrived and heard people calling this new baby Kalamatus, he said, who are you calling? Is that a human child or a vegetable? And then, of course, the father said, well, you sent this name. And he said, no, I didn't send Kalamatus. I sent Clement. The letter writer thought and wrote what he wrote. So, of course, accidentally, he is named Kalamatus, and his whole life becomes a series of accidents. So that's Kalamatus as a character. Probably one of the stronger characters in the book.
I can imagine. I wonder how I decided that I want to ask you about Kalamatus, Jumai. Okay, we're actually thinking it like, now, let's, before we go back to this book to actually read, a bit from it, let's talk about the writing style generally, for writers. What's your take on writing styles, that pertains to writers, and which one do you actually take to and you think is actually very, very good?
Well, I think the story you want to tell really decides for you how you write it. Okay. And then, sometimes you have a very strong message to pass to your readers, but you don't want to sound preachy, okay, because nobody wants to be preached at. When you want to be preached at, you go to church or the mosque. But when you pick up a novel, you want to be entertained, you want to have fun. So you have to now take a step back as a writer and begin to decide how do you present this story in a way that your reader will receive it. When the reader receives it, after reading it and enjoying it, maybe when he lies back in bed at night, he might consider, what have I just read? So that's the strategy. Okay. And so there are many different ways for a writer who has control to pass his message to the reader.
So what will you say about Diaries of a Dead African? What will you say about your writing style of this book?
Well, with Diaries of a Dead African, basically it's like, there's something that we call village square terrorism, which people probably don't know about, but it happens every day. We talk about terrorism. Terrorism is when you decide to blow up at a point and take out your rage on people who have nothing to do with your vex. And what happens to Meme Jumai, the last page of his own diary, is that he blows up in the village square. Of course, this was written way back in 2001, far from what is happening now. But we can also see that where there is no justice, and basically this book is about indifference. We used to have a communal style back in the day, when you were your neighbor's keeper. We had an extended family that if you fall down, somebody can lift you up. So our country is becoming smaller and smaller in terms of nucleation. People are becoming more nuclear in their family thinking. And so there are a lot of people who are falling through the gaps and a lot more suffering where there used to be. So Diaries of a Dead African touches that subject of indifference in our society, where families are shrinking and not taking up other responsibilities, and government is not expanding the welfare system to pick up people who are in trouble. So that results a lot in what we call village square terrorism. When people really, are hopeless, and then they take out their hopelessness on other people.
That's really insightful. We're actually having this moment with Chuma Nwokolo, yes, to let you know as well that he's the founder of the BOOk2ART Code, and he's also a lawyer. Besides that, he's a publisher and a writer. And you can actually tell when someone is actually good at what he is doing. You just wake him anytime and he delivers. But it's telling me so much, I'm like, I'm taken. I'm actually taken. Now, I know this one is one you gave me, 9 years back, Memories of Stone. We're about to read.
I can see it's very well read.
Memories of Stone. I've been flipping this book, and I really like what's on page 25 of Memories of Stone and Women of Shades. But before we take this, I'd really wanted to read this though. But before you read this, tell me more about Memories of Stone.
I wrote that book. Most of the poems I wrote in this book, I wrote them when I was in England, when I was the writer and resident at the Ashmolean Museum, which is part of the University of Oxford.
Okay.
And while I was writer in residence, I used to hold regular writing sessions where I would invite other writers to come, and reading sessions rather,
okay,
where I do performances for the public. So most of the poems I wrote in the museum, interacting with the artifacts, I collected in this
okay,
collection. That's why I talk about stone, because I have a lot of stone artifacts, many of them from Africa, including the largest exhibit there, which is a shrine that was imported wholesale from Sudan.
okay.
So yes, it's interesting you selected Woman of Shades.
Yes, Woman of Shades, because I'm a woman. Well, however it is, I really like that, and I wanted to read from it. So let's
okay, I'll read the first verse of it.
Okay.
Woman of Shades. My heart follows you home, woman of shades, to a realm that is a mystery to me. I have not seen the draperies on your walls, nor have I creaked the floorboards of your stairs. But it is not with me. This heart of mine is not with me when you are gone, woman of shades. Where do you go with me when you are gone away? That's a stanza.
I like the stanza. It gives the woman strength, as one can actually draw strength from, that poem, as it were. So it's a collection of poems, great poems, and you just said that, the way you actually caption it, Memories of Stone, it's
yes,
because of where you actually worked before, or
yes,
you had a bit of contributions there. Okay, now that's you doing your beats on your work, and I'd also want to do my beat on your literary work, so let's see how it fares. Well, we're taking Diaries of a Dead African, and we're looking at page 51. Yes, page 51. This is it, page 51, so I'll read. Well, that's the reverse version of it?
No, it's exactly the same, just a new skin.
Just a new, okay. Now let me read. I pray I didn't disappoint you. 17th June 2000, Kalama. Okay, I'll keep Pa's diary. Let that be my inheritance from him. They looted our compound before turning it into a rubbish dump. Hungry people, yet a madman's notebook wasn't the sort of thing they were looking for. When I cleared out the room to sleep, I saw it in the crack between the clay bed and the wall. This is war. I've been looking for fame, but not this type. This is really war. I went to the village square 3 or 4 times, but everything was still like cinema. This roasted animal inside burnt out tire wires. Is this really Meme Jumai? My father has finally seen that, saying what the arrogant soup saw that gave her the complexion of phases. The villagers were just following me around, jeering. Power went mad, yes, but the truth is that these Ikere people are devils. They just phoned me and told me to come, that my father was very sick. Is he dead? I asked the Igwe of Ikeroti. Just come, he told me. Is it stroke? Is it heart attack? Just tell me. There is nothing my ears can hear that will make them bleed. Just come, he told me. I'll let it rest there, and I'm actually in the character hit. And I can imagine, it's just like passing the information to someone, and especially when someone you really love dies, let alone your father, and they're trying to pass the information, and they just do it as though nothing happened, as quietly as possible, only for you to come and see a different thing, altogether. Now, it's not actually pleasant when you get that kind of information and you're hoping to see that your father is alive and you see something different completely. Now, this is really, really good. But I want us to look at another bit about you. Now, let me get to you personally. Now, growing up, you must have different motivation of some kind. One of such, I want to believe, is writing, and another, I want to believe, is publishing. So, am I right to say that it seems all you ever wanted was to be a lawyer, was to be a publisher, was to be a writer? Am I okay?
Yeah, I think, yes, I think I've been passionate about these currents in my life.
Okay.
While I was studying law, I was also writing. In fact, I became a published writer before I got my law degree. Okay. So while I was still in university, I had written 2 novels. One had been published, the second had been accepted. So yes, so I was called to bar in 1984, but my first book was published in 1983. So yeah, you can see that those are 2 consistent currents in my life. And of course, advocacy is about representing, and as a lawyer, that's what you do. And I think right now my country is my major client in the sense of when you look at where we are right now, okay. You look at where we're coming from. And we see that basically most of our life has been circulating around this question of how does Nigeria move forward. In fact, my book, How to Spell Nigeria, is a collection of 100 short stories that talks about Nigeria as a country. And when you look at Nigeria as a country, you find out that when we celebrated the 100th anniversary of amalgamation, you had a country that had what do you give to your country as a writer? You can give him short stories. So this collection is 100 short stories on the anniversary of Nigeria's amalgamation in 2014. So it's about that stepping back and looking at perspective. For instance, every single thing that happens in Nigeria, you can trace it back to a very, very limited set of themes. So you can see that in 100 stories, you can actually read the story of your country and get the messages and the explanations about things that have happened.
So you just feel like, let's assume I am not a Nigerian and I have this book, How to Spell Nigeria, in 100 short stories. So let's assume I'm not a Nigerian and I'm reading, and I'm thinking of actually doing a trip to Nigeria, for instance. So you can actually give me a lead on what to expect in the country Nigeria.
I think so.
Okay.
For instance, the story talks about how Nigerians talks about how Nigerians take, things like entertainment. You come to someone's house and he's asking you, do you want to eat? Of course, in a Nigerian household, when they ask you, do you want to eat? The answer should be no. But if you're really interested in giving food to somebody, you put it before the person.
Mm-hmm. Don't tell me I want the thank you type. What is okay, let me come and eat. All right, I really appreciate you. I appreciate your courage. Now, let's look at the design of your book. I want to believe that as a writer, I don't know if the design is also yours or someone actually contributed to some of your designs as well. Now, How to Spell Nigeria, I'm looking at this design, this one. Yes, I also look at The Ghost of Sani Abacha, this one.
Yes.
This book.
Yes, The Ghost of Sani Abacha is an interesting book. It's also a collection of short stories.
Okay.
I like to think that my main thing actually is writing short stories.
Okay.
And most of my books happen to have been designed by Victor Hikameno, who is one of Nigeria's foremost artists.
Okay.
And it's not just my impression that, you know, he's a fantastic artist.
Okay.
So this book, for instance, the central artwork was done by Victor Hikameno. And the design itself is by him. He designed How to Spell Nigeria. He designed the anniversary cover of Diaries of a Dead African.
Wow.
So as you can see, he's been a principal designer of my work. He also has designed a few of the covers for our magazine, African Writing. And so, but my last book, Extinction of Menai, the Nigerian and Ghanaian edition was designed by my daughter, who is also a writer and artist, Nkechukwu. So yes, so there is a variety of influences behind the schemes of my books.
Wow. Very, very interesting. We've been interacting with Chuma.
The cover of Diaries of a Dead African, the very first one, this was designed by, at least the artwork came from the Italian edition of this book, which was published in an Italian magazine. The Italian magazine that published this was actually publishing the best 3 short stories in the world. Diaries of a Dead African was one of them. So I thought it would be a good idea to take the cover, or rather the artwork from that design, from that story, and put it on the back of the book.
Okay. Now, I'm sure you've been wondering what's going on. Like both, look at the book, you see Diaries of a Dead African, and this one reads also Diaries of a Dead African. Now, some people are saying, are they different books or are they in volumes? Now, why do we have it like this?
This is the original volume. It was published in 2013.
Okay.
2003 when it was first published. And in 2013, at the 10th anniversary of the book, we gave it an anniversary cover. So that's what happened there.
Okay.
But it's exactly the same book.
Or like rebranding the book.
Yeah, exactly. Give it a new leg.
Okay. Now let's see. I would believe that for everyone, everybody in this life, they do have what motivates them. They also have role models. Now, do you have a particular role model, or you have role models? And what's your very big motivation to actually go on?
Those are very difficult questions because yes, I think I'm internally driven. A lot of times I find I'm very introverted, and I'm not really moved by what I see around me. So I'm internally driven. I go into hermitage often, which means I retreat into myself to try and ask myself questions like, what is the meaning of all this? What matters in all this? I think that is where the writing comes from. So I think that writing came out of reading and really getting to, there's a point you get to in your reading when you start thinking about the things you have read. And when the things you have read begin to collide with the things you see around you, and they don't make any sense, you begin to try to make sense in writing.
Okay.
And there's a point in that trying to make sense of life in writing that you think, well, maybe other people should read this. So by the time you make enough sense in your mind, you begin to want to share that with other people. So I think part of my writing is, it comes out of the things I've read, and my influences have been so much. I read everything. I read the back of matches, the skin of conflicts. Yeah, all these are things you read. And
are you thinking of, writing a book about yourself? Do you have one?
Do I have a book about myself and me?
So
I think everything I write has a piece of myself.
I wanted to just do one. You should just give it a thought to do a book about you. It would just be Chuma. Nwokolo.
No, I think the truth of the matter is that with a memory like mine, anything I write about myself is likely to be fiction. So I'm not doing enough fiction as it is.
Okay.
So it's probably going to be like that.
Okay. Now, Diaries of the Dead African, it's a collection of, stories. Let's say 3 of this, Kalamatos Jumai, and then you also have Meme Jumai and Abel Meme Jumai. Yeah, the 3 chapters now. What lessons are you actually telling people out there? What should they learn? For instance, I'm picking this book for the first time. What do you think I'll take home, as a lesson to learn, to drive with, here? So, but what I was asking this, I'll also find out from how to spell Nigeria. You mentioned a bit about it, which is good. Like you can actually tell what's happening in Nigeria. Now, the Diaries of the Dead African, what lesson do you think one should take up here?
That's a difficult question to ask a writer because if I could tell you the lessons, I wouldn't write the book. I'll just tell you the lessons.
Okay.
But I think most of it, what I really want people to get from that book is to enjoy the story.
Okay.
The enjoyment of the story. There's something about telling a story. It's so basic to the human nature. And when you find out that, when you discover how our ancestral communities used to live, when we actually begin to tell ourselves stories, it's about sharing your culture, sharing your personal story, your biography, your understanding of the world. So these are the things that when you share those with people, it's like you're making a connection that is very, very deep. And you can never reduce that to just, this is the moral of the story. Because when, for instance, you have these, a bedside story you tell your children, it's the magic of the story that carries them through, not so much the moral. But if you press me for a moral behind Diaries of a Dead African, it is this, that communities have to think about themselves. They have to care about themselves. And when you think about what's happening in Nigeria, you find out that we have a failure of empathy. Nobody thinks about the other person. You're thinking only about your skin.
Yourself, yeah.
So you have a community of people in Asaba, for instance, who are hating on the people in Jigawa that they have never met.
I am telling
You know, and you have the people in Borno, for instance, a community in a village in, say, Lassa, who are hating on a village in Ogun State that they have never met because of stories that have been told by their ancestors and by the media and by people around them. So if you do fiction a lot, fiction allows you to enter the skin of a stranger.
Okay.
Somebody you've never met, you don't share anything with. By the time a good novelist tells you a story and you get into the skin of that character, you begin to feel the pain, the happiness, the joys of a different person. And if we can learn empathy like that, we can begin to think of ourselves in this country and beyond as people who have blood flowing in their skin.
Well, the big catch there for me is that empathy. People lack empathy. You find yourself doing so much, bringing out your best to make sure a beat goes well, and the only thing you get is hate, lack of empathy, and you're actually doing it, and putting all efforts. The best you can do is you can't die there. They said don't die there. You just live there and go somewhere else where you'll be appreciated. That's life, Others are appreciative for what you're doing, and I am actually appreciating you for what you're doing.
Thank you very much.
And it's a delight to have you here. And I would definitely want you to be here again. Let's see your new book, or maybe we'll just zero in on that. But to let you in, we're just joining. This is Book2ART, and we'll be interfacing with Chuma Nwokolo. Yes, he is a Nigerian lawyer and a writer, a publisher. Well, I forgot a thing. I know that your books, there's some that are in different translation. You want to tell us more about the translation?
Well, yes. Like I said, Diaries of a Dead African was actually translated into Slovene and Italian. But of course, that has very little meaning for us here. I have some of our other stories that have been translated into other languages. Other translations are pending, particularly into French, which I think would be very important for our sub-region.
You're also delving into audiobooks. You're getting audio bits out of your books.
That's right. Right now, currently, I'm recording Diaries of a Dead African. I think you played that in the introduction.
Yes.
So that book, readers who find it very difficult to find time to read can simply plug on their headphones and listen to a book. So if you're interested in that, you can always order that on my website, www.nwokolo.com.
For a fee, you're going to pay that.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's about it on the program Book2ART. We appreciate you. We've been delving on Diaries of a Dead African. We had How to Spell Ninja in 100 Short Stories by Chuma Nwokolo, and The Ghost of Sani Abacha, and so much more. So we're saying that as a writer, don't give up, do your best. Soon you will be there, you'll have your books there. Soon you'll have Wikipedia doing a bit about you as well. You don't have to write your stories. They write the stories for you. They see and they follow and they do the best they can. I appreciate you, Chu. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much.
Okay, that's about it on the program Book2ART. It's been really, really good. I just said it's more like a reunion. I haven't seen him like 9 years. And by the way, you look the same. I'm going to ask
Just
you.
have to put the
No, we just look the same. You tell me the secret later, okay? All right, do stay with us. Next Wednesday at 10 is another moment to be part of it again on Delta Television, The People's Pride. This is your very own Jemima. Signing off.
Delta Television Asaba, 10 a.m. every Wednesday. Do the arts, stay smart.